All right, so as my man Rodrick Z here just said, live from the House of the Magi, doing a collaboration today with Rodrick Z. Rodrick,
what's up, everybody?
Yeah.
Back from the dead. It's been a long time, but
remember this video too?
Yeah, we're back. We're back. Oh, yeah, we're back.
Rodrick used to doing podcasts only, and
yeah, I used to show my mug.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the loss for the viewer. That's what I'm saying. But yeah. So we're just gonna kind of jam today about something that's been on my mind a lot. So I have been single since December, and so I had the learning experience of going back to online dating and just kind of like trying to connect with women via online sources rather than organically, just because I guess I have it in my head, whether it's accurate or not, I have it in my head that approaching women in public is going to go badly. You know, and I think it's not true. I think actually women are starved for that. Of course, if a woman doesn't find you attractive, she's going to shoot you down, and it sucks a lot more in person. But I think your odds are better than online. And I recently found out about this thing called the 80-20 rule, which, you know, as we talk about this whole thing, I mean, what Rodrick and I want to talk about today is just this whole contrived war between the masculine and the feminine. And it really is contrived because it's not a natural thing. It's really an artifact of the postmodern bull, you know, and which I guess there's a lot of evidence that points it comes out of the Frankfurt School of Sociology / Communism, apparently. There's a great video which on my end, I'm going to try and insert it in there by this incredible genius named Asha Logos. He has a channel here on YouTube, and he does this incredible thing called the War on the Feminine Masculine. I'm going to have a clip, I think, on my video version of it, and possibly, like, I might even insert it right here. But
As we look back in time at what our world was, what it has become, and where it's headed, one undeniable conclusion springs to mind. We seem to be at war with nature, both internally and externally. The fad of relativism, so aggressively propped up by academia, tells us that all is subjective, all is artificial construct and man-made label. There's essentially nothing real and true. Any opinion of how to live and be is as valid and potentially healthy as the next. However, the natural world, in its quiet, eternal wisdom, sits patiently as a powerful rebuke to this pretentiously deceptive wordplay. A template of such masterful complexity, operating in perfect balance and harmony, self-propagating, self-refining and improving, always adapting and creating, an echo and reflection of its creator, a shadow of God, insofar as we're able to grasp and understand it. When searching for cues on how to be, on how to best navigate the world around us, there is no better blueprint. And what does nature tell us? It speaks of the importance of order and organization, structure, of immutable laws that govern everything in the universe, from the macro to the micro. A glance at the animal kingdom and those creatures most like us shows us the importance of well-constituted, merit-based hierarchies. Also, the immense importance of hormones and the fundamental role of estrogen and testosterone in helping shape these hierarchies, as well as determining fitness in mate selection. Finally, nature informs us that creation is the ultimate goal. Self-propagation, recreating ourselves into new and slightly different forms. Any species that turns its back on this universal law commits suicide by so doing, and thereby proves itself unworthy of continued existence. Our age is being indoctrinated into denying this aspect of our true nature, and the outright war being waged on the masculine and feminine is one of the best examples of this.
In it, he really goes into depth, and he just talks about it. And I mean, but it's really a modern thing. There didn't used to be this idea of that there was a war between masculine and feminine at all. It really is a modern thing, and you see it everywhere you turn in what I call the dark triad of relating, and that is online streaming porn, social media, and dating apps. And the 80-20 rule I refer to is apparently on dating apps, the bottom 80% of men are apparently competing for the bottom 20% of women, which are the only ones who reply or swipe right to them. And the top 80% of women are competing for the top 20% of men. And there's a lot of data to back this up. Now, mind you, these are like hookup apps and it's online dating and all the shit that goes along with that. And I think there's, what underlies a lot of this stuff is biology, but I think it's been really exacerbated and intentionally a wedge driven between us, like in modernity. And I've been talking for a minute. And so, Rodrick, what are some of your thoughts on just this broad subject?
I mean, I just have like a lot of questions about it myself because I do pay attention to it. I have a lot of male friends, and some of them have had this absolute garbage luck with women, and they just don't know why. They're like, I don't know, like I've tried Tinder, I've tried Bumble, I've tried Plenty of Fish, and nobody gets back to me. And I've never done online dating ever in my life. It's always just been
smart man.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like I just kind of missed the boat with that. I've always played just serendipity. Just, I go out a lot. Let me just go out, and if it happens, it happens, but it doesn't. But it does happen, or has happened, I should say. But yeah, so I just have most of my dialogue right now may just be more questions because sometimes I kind of play with those kind of thoughts. Is it the society social engineering that's happening with it? Is it because 100%. Of the direction of markets right now? Like, because everything is like
I mean, those are kind of the same, I would say.
Yeah, they basically are the same, and everything is algorithms now. It's all about the algorithm. When you pick up your phone, information is directed to you personally based on whatever you were like typing and swiping or whatever, so could that be a part of it? Could it also be a part of the fact that we live in this part of the postmodern era? We live in a pretty comfortable era, somewhat. We're richer than we've ever been. There's more of a elder population, so there's less crime. Children are safer. I mean, there's still a lot of shit going on out there, but for the most part, there's a lot of comfort factors. And as a result of that, the anxiety levels are up, depression levels are up, things like that. So mine are just more questions like, do these factors, are they making it harder for, men in particular? This is kind of what we're going with right now when it comes to dating apps. So mine are just more questions. I don't really know for sure. I don't have the experience, but I have lots and lots of stories that are secondhand, really. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it is. I like I said, I think it's a little bit of technology being an extension of biology, but I think that there is an absolutely 100% ironclad. I personally have zero doubt that there's a social engineering agenda.
Yeah.
To drive men and women apart and go after the nuclear family. In fact, I mean, there's stuff to where it's outright said in a variety of different political organizations that wrap themselves falsely in the cloak of improving society or righting wrongs. And this isn't to say there are not very real issues that plague society. There definitely are, but I think a huge amount of them are overstated, and more importantly, they're used as a Trojan horse to bring in this social engineering stuff. And I mean, it's really everywhere you turn nowadays. I think if you have even a slightly critical lens, you can just see it everywhere. And I watched that Asha Logos video, which I recommend everyone watch, because it's this amazing broad overview, and that guy's just a genius. And I'm not attempting to compete with that video at all. I'm trying to take it more from the lofty perspective he has. And I don't agree with 100% what he says in that video, especially the tail end of it. I see his point, but I also feel like weirdly he was a little ham-fisted with that particular part, but the rest of it is absolutely extraordinary. And I also think he even has a point with that section. But and viewer, if you watch it, you'll see what I'm talking about. I don't even want to say it because I don't want to get bogged down in that or have to defend or whatever that person's position, because I don't hold that position. I see what they're saying, but I don't hold that position. But anyways, I really think that there's this generalized attack on nature, and human nature is the key, because if you get rid of, in particular, I think, the divine masculine element, you leave vulnerable women and children, because the male biological role is to protect and provide, and as necessary, sacrifice oneself for the women and children and for the culture, the society, the tribe, the group, right? And so, I think a lot of this is on a lot of people's minds right now, because I mean, this has really been a year where this particular phenomenon that I'm kind of wanting to talk about today. And I think I'm going to do a whole series on this, because I want to have women on the show to give their perspective, because I think it's so critical that we have a balance between the male and female. We live together, so it was easy, and we've been talking about it a lot recently. Rodrick's been kind of like chuckling as he hears me report back from the trenches of this very real but also completely contrived, like, war of the sexes thing.
I love it though. We have good dialogues about it too.
And so anyways, I am utterly convinced that there's an extreme amount of intentionality in particular, and I think we might focus a little more today, since we're both men and can speak to it more, the attack on the masculine. And I do want to say, I think that there's 110 trillion% attack on women as well. And I think that the opening volley of that was really second wave feminism that came out of postmodern thinking, which came out of this Frankfurt BS, in my estimation. And I absolutely think men and women both have equal value. And in fact, if anything, I would argue women have greater value for the simple fact that they produce children, they carry children to term. And there's a lot of data showing that women carry the culture forward. And they create that foundation from which we all grow, meaning like that mother-child bond. And I mean, we're mammals. And that, in a way, is what distinguishes us from the bonding between the mother and the child. Is what distinguishes us from reptiles and amphibians and birds and all that kind of stuff. That said, there's been a very concerted effort to attack the divine masculine principle in particular, because it then leaves women and children, who I think are a little easier to attack from the psychological perspective and the physical, really, because of just the differences between the way men and women's brain function works. Men are able to shut off their emotional center, the right hemisphere. And that's fantastic for like critical situations where you have to act and not think, and maybe you need to kill and you need to do it in a moment you can't hesitate, no hesi, as my son would say, or you're dead. You can't hesitate when there's like your wife and child are trapped in a burning building. You got to bum rush in there and get them out, and you can't be thinking too emotionally, or maybe everybody dies.
Right. I mean, it's helped carry culture forward.
Absolutely.
It's helped carry our civilizations forward and help us survive. So I mean, like, and that's one of the things that kind of has bugged me before in the past, like when I have looked on social media when it comes to these debating topics about gender. And I know it's a whole other topic. Some people want to throw out gender altogether, and that could be like a whole other conversation.
It's nonsense.
But there is importance in both. There's importance in
Absolutely.
the masculine and the feminine, and it's just everywhere in nature. And you can't have one without the other. It just does not work like that. It's never worked like that. It never will work like that. You know, so we
not with our species. I mean, there's hermaphroditic species, but you know, or whatever, like single-celled organisms that just split. I forget what that's called. Asexual reproduction.
Right.
But we produce sexually. It's a fact. It's just how it is.
Yeah.
You know, and even if they try and have artificial wombs and all that stuff, it's simply a technological mimicry or mocking, really, of the natural process. And you know, you and I both have a spiritual bent on things, and I do want to talk about that. And I think that everything filters down from the realm of archetypes, and I see this in that same struggle for domination that comes out of like this Malachian idea. And the Malachians, they want domination and total control. And ultimately, you know, and that's a lower aspect of Saturn, in my opinion. And ultimately, you know, another aspect of Saturn is death. And Moloch is like, has two ways of ruling: total enslavement or annihilation. I've literally, I will just say, I one time I'm able to channel, and I one time had Moloch approach me, and so I channeled Moloch of all things. It was the single most unsettling thing probably of my entire life, or very close to it. I was really messed up for like a couple of weeks afterwards, and I absolutely do not recommend that to anyone. Moloch wouldn't go away, and I called the angels in and the archangels to be with me and protect me during it. It was still risky and perhaps foolish, but I got some important information out of it. And one of the things I got out of it was Moloch was like, I allow for total submission or total annihilation. That's it. Moloch also explained to me like their function in the universe, which is to pound karma out of souls over the course of the Kali Yugas, and that Moloch acts sort of like a black hole that takes in matter and then ejects gamma radiation, that it just destroys and consumes everything, and then it releases like a high energy burst and acts as like a very intense, very horrible alchemy. And if you watch my show, you know I talk about Moloch all the time, and it's both an actual deity and it's also an archetype for me of like describing this. Some people call it the satanic system. I don't like that because it's a little too imprecise for me, but Moloch seems to want us not to have genders, because Moloch is kind of like completely counter to natural law, completely counter to creation, and wants to create everything, or to make everything artificial, because with everything artificial and emanating from Moloch, then and only then can there be total control. And so I really feel like that's the source of all this stuff that's attempting to get men and women to fight each other in every turn. And I see it like everywhere I turn, that they're making women more masculine and they're making men more feminine, but not just any kind. It seems to me that they're trying to force humanity into the dark feminine for women and men both, and the dark masculine for women and men both. And how that plays out is, and I'm just going to say, this next part might offend some people. There's some women I really care for a lot, or even love, and some men I really care about or even love, who fit into these four I'm about to talk about. So there's divine masculine, divine feminine, which is really great. And I think it's pretty hard for men to be divine feminine, and I think it's pretty hard for women to be divine masculine. It might be possible, but I think it's very challenging. And of course, everyone has masculine and feminine within them, and they have to balance that out. But what I see happening is I see us shoved into the dark masculine, dark feminine silos. And for men, the way that operates is with the dark masculine, that's the proverbial F-boy. I'm trying not to swear because I hear that messes with the algorithm. It's the F-boy. It's the player, douchebag, scumbag, manipulator, a guy who just shuts off his emotions, who's just looking out to go out there and have sex with as many women as possible, damn the consequences, certainly won't stick around if there's any offspring. You know, the kind of the classic internet term for these guys is the Chad and the Tyrone, which is not to be confused with a man who is physically strong and masculine and a good man.
Or a good man that might happen to have the name Chad or Tyrone. Not every Chad and Tyrone are like bad.
I'm sure none of those guys mind it too much because Chad and Tyrone is somewhat synonymous with winning as well, which is funny because we've talked about that too. Like, is it winning if you're engaging in that thing? And that's the other thing, is getting siloed into these 4 quadrants of the dark masculine, dark feminine, both masculine and feminine versions. There is no winning. It's everybody loses. So there's the dark masculine. That's pretty obvious. These Chad, Tyrone player guys, or ruthless businessmen who don't give a shit and just get people out of homes, fire 1 million workers as a CEO to give himself a bigger bonus. Ruthless lawyers, all politicians pretty much. Hollywood narcissist stars. I mean, they're the dark triad, the classic dark triad characteristics for a male. Then there is, and this is interesting to me, there is the nice guy.
Yeah, the very misunderstood overabundance of which most of us, I think, like, I don't have any real numbers, but I would say like easily 90% of men that have discovered their like inner alpha. I don't mean like douchey alpha. I mean like, taking charge.
Divine masculine.
Divine masculine. There you go. Divine masculine. It was, I like to call it the red-pilled gentleman. Go through, a lot. We have been through a nice guy phase in our life, because we learned that, or at least I have, speaking from my experience, I learned early on that I would get certain needs met by being more agreeable.
Absolutely.
And less challenging. And then, like, as I've gotten older and more, different experiences happen, I saw that it was anything but helpful, anything but useful. So the lesson from there was to learn from, okay, so do I transcend into a like a douchey alpha male, or a guy that's going to get stuff accomplished and be like the more divine masculine, or or remain a nice guy? Like, what's going to happen here? Like, where do we go from here? Because I think a lot of men that struggle with women that have come and talked to me about it a little bit, they have admitted that they're still in their like phase of being very, very nice, or they're tired of being nice, and they recognize that they don't know what to do about it, kind of deal. So
yeah, absolutely. And society very much pushes us towards that. It very much pushes us towards that. Or the other way it pushes you is the Andrew Tate. He's the hot topic Reddit at the moment. I'm personally not a fan. I know some people I really respect who like this guy, which I don't get it, but I respect them, and so I respect their opinion. I've met some people who I respect them, and I don't know why they think this, but they claim that he's been railroaded and whatever. And considering what we saw with Trump, who, again, not a fan, but the amount of egregious lies about Trump, who would totally fit that dark masculine archetype, womanizer, just ethicless, moralist, and viewer, if you like Trump, I don't care. Good for you, I guess. I like Trump better than Biden, but that's the lowest possible bar, deep below the Marianas Trench, to casually, deep seawater frickin' submarine over, because it's so far below sea level. So who cares? That should be all of humanity is able to step over that bar. So there's like that. They want to push you towards that because like men are like, those guys get women, and they do because they're masculine. And women are like, if my choice is between a masculine guy or the dark feminine dominated nice guy, and that's the funny thing, the nice guy embodies. Thank you. The dark feminine, weirdly enough, that was pointed out to me on another channel, and I was like, that was when it suddenly hit me in my sort of moving away from that. And the reason I think that so many men end up there is because in our generation, Gen X, we're the first generation pretty much in this country to where the majority of men were not working with their dads out on the farm. or maybe in their dads in the factories, right? You know, like our grandparents might have been working with their dads in the factories, you know, before like the unions and stuff came along. Maybe that's more like our great grandparents, but nonetheless, unless you're one of those people who lived in the cities, which most people lived rurally before 1940, the majority of the population did. Like my father grew up on a farm in Montana, and he had to get up at 4:30 in the morning and go milk cows. And he worked with his dad. And so I don't think it occurred to my father that he had to teach me how to be a man.
Yeah, which comes from through osmosis.
Exactly. Like he just learned how to be a man from being around his dad. And my dad was super masculine. And he was somewhere between this dark masculine and the divine masculine, because he did take care of his family, and he stayed with my mother up until his death, which I want to get to that point later, and how I put the blame for a lot of this right at the feet of baby boomer men for starting the most recent dark cycle. But so you have the nice guys, which I definitely was, and they're dominated by the dark feminine. And so they're very backbitey. They cozy up to women, or like pretend like they're the friend of the woman right out of the gate. And the woman takes it at face value. And for a woman gets a lot of validation, a lot of juice from a male giving her emotional support. My ex-wife actually told me that emotional relating with a man is sex for a woman. I'm not saying that's true, but she said that it was very close in terms of value to sex. And of course, she loved sex, so it wasn't. I'm talking about my second wife, who will never listen to this. So not my son's mother, and not the other relationship I had. But she pointed that out to me, that for women, that emotional relating is very close to sex. So women get an awful lot from these nice guys, and very often they get taken out to dinner. They get a shoulder to cry on when Chad and Tyrone do the pump and dump and out, which is a really nasty term on there. And you know, and it's funny because a lot of the nice guys, when they suddenly go, their eyes open, and I consider myself a handsome man, and clearly my election returns, so to speak, back that up. Like you and I think, have both been pretty lucky and successful generally, and like fortunate. I've had a lot of girlfriends, you know, married a few times, you know, had a number of sex partners, a fair amount, you know, a lot more than a lot of my friends. And that's fortunate, although I would have traded all in for like one that would set and would be long term. I would trade all that in a heartbeat. But my point with that is that even with the fact that, you know, I think I'm above average handsome, you know, I'm fairly tall, 6 feet, all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of stuff going for me. I'm smart and pretty charming, all that kind of stuff. I still would just get run over by this stuff because I did the nice guy bullshit, and I didn't even know it was wrong. And so when you first wake up from that, it's hard not to have a reaction to that. And like, even when I was looking up certain things on dating, kind of in preparation for the show, an interesting thing happened. And we talk about the algorithm, and there's so much on that. We were going to have a whole show just on that, and there is material for that. The algorithm's like, oh, you're looking at dating stuff? What about men going their own way? What about a little dash of misogyny? What about a heaping helping of misogyny? What about you should hate all women? And the social engineering of hating women, which is partially reactionary. We're in a very reactionary phase, a bit like the 90s against PC, which, as it turns out, was 100% correct. Which doesn't mean we shouldn't respect people, just that they were right to see the danger back then, even if some of those guys were douchey, and it was coming from people I don't like. But when you first wake up from this shit, you very much, there's a knee-jerk reaction to lash out against it, and to maybe like start to be like, maybe women are the problem. No,
it's so easy to point the finger at the other all the time, and not like oneself, and not saying like, well, what can I do to build the better man in myself, build a better person myself, or whatever. But I didn't mean to cut you off. But
oh no, dude,
I've watched tons of I've watched tons of MGTOW videos years ago.
That's men going their own way.
Men going their own way. It was maybe, I think I started watching some in 2016 because I have a curious mind, and I didn't want to join a group or jump in a bandwagon. I wanted to know what people were talking about.
Yeah.
And I saw some really good points in some of this stuff. I saw some great points, you know, like avoiding really superficial kind of like vapid women. Just avoid them. Don't you know, take care of yourself. Some of these guys like, you know, like worked out quite a bit, did cool stuff. Some of them did martial arts. Some of the MGTOW guys. But what I started to find as I went a little bit deeper is I just found that a lot of these guys were just very, very hurt at the inside.
Yeah.
And some of them, like some of the MGTOW channels, I won't name any, they weren't the best looking guys, and they weren't like, some of them were kind of like overweight dudes. I mean, I'm trying to be respectful right now.
No, it's true.
But some of them were just like kind of overweight guys, maybe smoked a little bit too much pot, you know, and ate a little bit too much like donuts and stuff, and just like they didn't really have like any of that going for them in that way. So they just got mad at women passing them up all the time. I felt like some of them were like that. They were like, so there were some more red pill, and that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other kind of movement, you know, like the red pill guys I liked a little bit more, but I started to find, this is just my personal experience with diving in that kind of media. I saw that some of them were a little bit of hating women too. So they had all this knowledge, like they knew all kinds of stuff about pornography and like how it's bad and how you want to keep your testosterone levels at a good level, how to get shit done, how to get things accomplished. Like those things I can agree with. I love all that stuff. But then they would just kind of put on their YouTube channels like, oh, look at this woman here. She's like horrible and like, you know what I mean? And I felt like that was kind of like an unhealthy way to go about it too. So
it is, and it's very reactionary, and it's really like to me this MGTOW stuff. It's second wave feminism for men.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to go back to, if you don't mind, to the point I was going to make about this being ruled by the dark feminine, like for the nice guys, like what those men do is they deep down, they don't feel confident in themselves. They didn't learn how to be masculine. They didn't learn about that they need to take care of their body and their mind, be that philosopher-warrior, right? Which the ancients, in basically almost every culture on earth, had something like that. You know, you see it in the samurai, you see it in the Trojans, you see it in the Spartans, although they took men going their own way to a very, very far thing, to the point where they had to pass laws in Sparta to say you gotta have sex with your wife at least once a month, dude. Enough banging your shield mate. Like, come on, get in there with your wife once in a while. We're gonna be wiped out. But nonetheless, like maybe Athenians is a better example, though.
Oh well, I don't know.
Maybe only slightly.
The 300 movie I've seen so many times.
Oh,
Gerard Butler, like
that's the opposite of the historical reality.
Philosophers and boy lovers. It was like,
yeah, that's the opposite though. Sparta was much more into that, which is its own subject. But anyways, the point is that there's this ancient movement of philosopher warriors. And that there was like warriors without philosophy would just aimlessly fight for ignoble causes. And philosophers who didn't know how to like fight and whatever would lose respect and think that they should start telling the other people what to do without really understanding what that was, the kind of Aristotle philosopher king and unleashing Alexander the Great onto the world kind of thing. But so the nice guys, they just really don't understand that women don't respect that. And you want love from women, sure, but you're never going to get love from a woman other than pat on the head love from a woman who doesn't respect you. You have to earn a woman's respect. And if you don't, there's not a chance on earth she's going to love you. And in a lot of marriages and relationships that go awry over time, because of the man's behavior, the woman loses respect and then the relationship falls apart. And this isn't to say women don't ruin relationships. You know, obviously, both of us have experienced that, you know, and we both had to look at ourselves in ways in which we needed to hold ourselves accountable in ways that, you know, when I look back on my relationships, especially with knowing what I know now about this exact subject we're talking about, I'm like, I didn't, you know, hold the frame. I wasn't masculine enough. I wasn't like taking care of business. I wasn't taking care of my body. I wasn't embodying the divine masculine. Oh, I was embodying this dark feminine energy. So I want to real quick, just because I think it's an important context, on the female side. And again, I don't want to offend any of my viewers, because I've noticed men seem to take that dose of what we just talked about a little bit better than some women will take what I'm about to say. And that is that a lot of women, thank you, second wave and third wave feminism, have said, although third wave in some ways is better, but also has some very pernicious, nasty hooks in there, like sex work is real work. And then now in Germany, brothels are calling up unemployed women, and if they turn it down, then those women get cut off from unemployment. I just read about this.
Wait, really?
Absolutely insane.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's where sex work is real work gets you. If you want your 19-year-old out of work daughter who's on benefits in Germany, she gets called by the brothel. If she doesn't go in there, then she'll get cut off of benefits. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Nuts.
It's crazy. And by the way, I you know, total respect. Some people I love and are friends and whatever are straight up sex workers. Like I have a friend who is a world famous dominatrix, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
And I actually have a lot of respect for her. She's amazing. And so not trying to dog on that. And we are going to talk on sex work here in a second, but the moving of women into the dark masculine is more like those women who went in the corporate place and they're just stabbing backs and they're climbing up and they're utterly ruthless, no empathy or as little empathy as a woman can muster. And they're just total careerists and slashing throats. And then maybe in their 40s, they suddenly want to have kids. But until then, they're just utterly ruthless. They're climbing the ladder and they behave like these men. And they might also be like just eating men up on the side when they go out for sex. They're like, yeah, let's have sex, and zero connection, and next. You know, that is the kind of women who get pushed into the dark masculine of being a total careerist. And I'm not talking about women working. Like almost all women work now. I'm talking about the ruthless. Right. Women have always worked. And I mean, women have always worked in home as well. But I'm talking about working in the workplace. Sector. But poor women have always worked. That's been shown that very poor women have always had to go into the mines, the coal mines, and whatever. And so, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the women who go in and they're just ruthless careerists. Yeah. You know, and you see this all the heck over the place, and it's lauded. It's so wonderful, and they're embodying that dark masculine quality.
I'm thinking about like my imagination is taking me to like a Wall Street worker.
Yeah,
you know, like a Jordan Belfort type, but in a female, woman's.
Or like all these female CEOs of like almost every major defense industry contractor has a female CEO right now. It's crazy. Raytheon and Boeing, maybe not Boeing, but Raytheon, and what's the other big one? Raytheon, Boeing, and well, anyways, the other super big one also has a female CEO right now. And part of that's pink washing or whatever, where they put a woman in, you know, and pulled her up to the ranks. But I guarantee you that woman is ruthless AF. To get to the top of Lockheed Martin, for God's sake.
Oh God,
So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about women going in and working and being competent businesswomen. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about a particular dynamic. Likewise, this next one I'm going to talk about is also going to be tricky. And again, some people I very much love and am friends with and respect do this. I do think it has an impact on you psychologically. And that is the women who go in the dark feminine are the women who are like, come to me, simp army.
Oh, man.
And bring me thy tribute.
The OnlyFans and
come
stuff.
To my OnlyFans. Come to my Instagram. Oh, yeah. See, if you go on dating sites as a man, like a good 2/3 of the really attractive women you see on there are like, oh, I'm not on Tinder that much, but add me on Instagram, or worse yet, OnlyFans. And then they're like, send me a message and we can do videos together. And they're like, oh, you have to subscribe to send me a message. And there's so many fake profiles and traps, although recently they got a bit better about some of that stuff. My favorite was when you'd be scrolling through and you'd be like, wow, this woman is freaking gorgeous. And then it'd be like some ugly guy that looked like he was in the third world. And I was like, what the hell? Or some really hard-faced one in the third world. And I was like, why do they have a picture of a random, like, angry, man from Southeast Asia with a cigarette, with an ash 2 inches long? Like, what the hell is that? Well, what it was it's a verified profile. And they put his max pictures. and right near the end there would be the picture of the actual dude, and the rest of it was just a scam.
Working in money,
trying to get lonely men, nice guys and betas or whatever to go for this. And I don't like the beta alpha dichotomy. I like to add in sigma, and then just that there's men who don't want to get caught up in the alpha thing, which I don't even really like alpha as a term, because to me alpha is more Chad and Tyrone. I like divine masculine, because that guy may or may not be the biggest guy around. That guy may or may not be the most dominant in the room. And it doesn't matter who the most dominant in the room is. When two men meet who are good men, they'll have immediate respect for each other.
Yeah.
And even these alpha guys, they know when a man is divine masculine, and they'll have respect for that guy, even if they have a desire to like dominate and be above him.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know you know what I'm talking about.
I think the term has been just used to death. I mean, I still catch myself using it because sometimes the word alpha just gets it done. Like what I'm trying to say, it's like alpha, beta, but sometimes I'll joke
omega.
Omega,
Omega is the absolute lowest, by the way.
Gamma, we're just going through the whole
and sigma, and then I think we both kind of like to think of ourselves as sigma males, which is those are the men who just go against the grain of society and are like do their own thing, and maybe there is a family, but I kind of think it's like the iconoclast. And I think there's probably dark sigma males, and I think there's also divine masculine sigma males. Same thing with alphas. And I mean sigma is interesting because just in case some listeners may not be familiar with it, sigma originated from the archetype of the sigma wolf. So, in the wolf pack, there's always an alpha wolf that's like the bigger, stronger wolf, the wolf that gets the alpha wolf is the only wolf in the pack that gets to mate. It's the only one that gets the choice of like who to mate with. And then obviously the beta male or the beta wolf is the one that's like in back of that one, in the back of the pack. Sigma wolves often will leave the pack and they go live alone, which is very risky in the wild, especially if you're like an Alaskan Sigma wolf, when there's like big ass bears everywhere and things that can kill you. But sometimes what happens with the Sigma wolf is it learns to survive on its own. It learns to play nature its own way, to its own way as much as it can, while following the rules of nature. And eventually finds its own pack. The ideal Sigma wolf will find its own pack. It will find a mate and end up being in charge of its own pack later on. So that's kind of where that comes from. So I like to think of like the Sigma male archetype as a man that, I don't know, personal definition, just takes care of himself, honors himself a lot, and having a lot of self-respect, because you can't love another until you love yourself, right? So you're focusing on all of that, and then you make your pack, or you just find your mate, whatever it is, so that's kind of where that my long-winded answer where that comes from. So dude, I don't even want to see the percentages right now of who talks more, because we both know.
This is so good.
That's the one place I'm definitely an alpha, is in talking too damn much.
It's all good, man. You have a lot to say, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, so do I.
Oh, it's cool, man. And so like for me, the Sigma male is kind of like my favorite example of that, like kind of from movie history, is probably Mel Gibson in The Road Warrior.
Yeah, that's a great
I think
example.
that's like kind of like the perfect Sigma. Or in the later, what's his name did a hell of a job in the most recent Road Warrior movie. What is that guy's name? Tom Hardy, dude, I love that guy.
Watch that video.
I don't even want to, like, viewers, if you please don't put anything below. Tom Hardy killed 5 trillion people and he's pure evil. I don't care what these people did. The movie's so no, just there's nobody. It seems there's nobody in Hollywood who isn't involved in all the evil Illuminati nonsense. And it's like once in a while, I just want to enjoy a goddamn movie. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to know.
I never heard
I've
that
had
before.
so many shows and actors and stuff ruined, and like once I know I can't like go back and I can't like watch them anymore. Like I'm off Rick and Morty forever, for example. Even though I love that show.
Well, with good reasons.
Oh yeah, those guys are freaking evil. But anyway, so if you know stuff about Tom Hardy, keep it to yourself. I don't want to know. Same thing. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
So
go ahead.
I was asking like who's an example of an alpha male in like earlier times and modern times? I know I have a couple of
Arnold Schwarzenegger's like kind of the ultimate alpha, I think. And he's definitely the dark masculine alpha. He's definitely the dark masculine alpha.
Really?
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
What about Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I think Trump's the dark masculine. I don't know if he's an alpha. He's
really?
almost somehow Sigma E. He's kind of somewhere between alpha and Sigma. He just doesn't give enough of an F, whereas Arnold has always very carefully cultivated his image, I think.
Really? I mean, because like
I guess
Trump
so.
has a couple of. I mean, I was just thinking like Trump has a couple of alpha moments in my mind, like where
yeah,
he's like pushing the one.
My favorite is when he slapped when you go back to 2016 debates, when he did us all a favor, and not that he had any chance, but he got Jeb Bush and just pwned him. There's a hilarious video where they cut in where they have that horn whenever he like just dogs Jeb Bush. Oh god, it's so funny.
Putin will be alpha too, right?
God, he's a leader, but he somehow feels Sigma again to me.
Really?
I was gonna say, I think you know who I'm gonna.
Oh God, he's like the alpha lord.
You know who I am.
Sean Connery is like Lord of Alpha Man. Yeah,
in his prime.
Yeah,
I was Mr. Universe, and then I became Bond. I somehow outdid myself.
In every way possible, that man is alpha man. Every way possible. That interview. Oh
my God,
the Bond clips. I mean, just like
I know what interview you're talking about. I don't know. That was pretty toxic. I think that that's pretty toxic, but it is.
If anybody wants to be offended, that may be offended, go look that up with Barbara Walters after this, and you'll see what we're talking about.
I think I might get some females. Well, Barbara. Yeah,
but he did the class. Using him as an example, that he did the classic.
He is the best Bond ever. Period.
He controlled the frame of the conversation in that interview. He was confident 100%.
He does not lack.
No matter like whatever she threw at the interviewer threw at him.
He's not a sociopath. When we mention two politicians, there's I feel
they're a little bit sociopathic,
more than a little sociopath.
Be that successful and whatnot. Yeah,
and I think Arnold is a sociopath too, actually.
Yeah.
Whereas Sean Connery, I just think is like a hedonist alpha and a bit dark masculine, and he's funny. And he's like probably my all-time favorite person to do an impression of. So
I actually like that.
That's
nice. I did. I'm gonna be honest, man. I like it.
Rodrick's gonna go ahead and claim that.
I'm not gonna lie, man. Like I actually like that interview. I
certainly like the old Bond movies.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I did too. The ones I've seen, at least.
Yeah. I mean, they are dated in a lot of ways. But again, that to me is that's still not divine masculine. It's so rare. I mean, that's just it. We're in the Kali Yugas, and divine masculine are the threat to the Malakians, and so they sure as hell don't want to put them, on TV. Oh, I thought of another great Sigma, the man without a name in all the Sergio Leone, Clint Eastwood movies.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Just 100%. Yeah.
That's a perfect Sigma.
Yeah, for sure.
Get 3 coffins ready.
Yeah, definitely. I love how he played that. That's just it's brilliant. Yeah.
You should all watch Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More. What are the other two? We should watch those again.
A Few Dollars More.
Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but there's a middle one in there.
Yeah. High Plains Drifter.
High Plains Drifter isn't technically in that same.
So it's not that same character. Set, yeah.
It is. I think, and I don't even know if Sergio Leone directs that one. But anyways, we're obviously both Eastwood fans.
Yeah.
Yes. Clint Eastwood is kind of I think it's Sigma though. I think Clint Eastwood those movies is a Sigma.
I think he's much more Sigma than Alpha in that role for sure. He's the lone wolf archetype 100%.
Yeah, the lone wolf archetype is kind of like a good way of describing the Sigma.
He really is. Yeah.
So what divine masculine archetypes, like, can you think of, like, are there any out there? Like King Arthur, I think, is kind of the ultimate divine masculine archetype in Western culture, or Beowulf, or what's that guy, the original badass guy from the Sumerian text? I'm blanking on his name right now.
Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh, yeah.
And King David, possibly, you think?
I don't like King David.
King David has some alpha moments in the stories
for sure.
Kill his wife or kill her husband.
Yeah, that's definitely dark masculine. I saw her bathing on the roof, and I wanted to get some of that, so I sent her how to use my powers as king to send her
I think
husband
in the earlier part of this of the text though, when he was younger, he was more
right,
that
it's
way.
because he takes that playa.
But when he
pretty badass.
yeah, but when he gets the power in the stories,
yeah, he doesn't handle it well.
He's
yeah. So I guess Moses maybe would be a good example of an alpha, right?
yeah.
Right, and
Moses.
there's less negativity associated with him, and he's maybe more so than the divine masculine.
Yeah.
Hercules is perfect. He's divine masculine all the way. He does, I think, he kills his wife, but it's because he's driven to madness by one of the gods.
Greek mythology has more divine masculine.
Perseus is divine masculine. Agamemnon is divine masculine. Odysseus is divine masculine.
Definitely. Odysseus.
What's his name? With Achilles is divine masculine. Yeah, I mean, all those guys are divine masculine, and Odysseus also has almost a bit of that Sigma-ish flavor.
Would you think any of the emperors like Marcus Aurelius?
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius is the only emperor.
The only,
I guess you could say dark masculine, but for sure alpha, like whatever, genius Augustus, Caesar Augustus, Octavian.
Well, he was dark masculine.
Julius Caesar, Julius Caesar gets a bad rap. I think he might actually be divine masculine, and that's why the Malachians didn't like it and killed him, because he wanted to give Michael Prente talks about that a lot, talking about how actually he tried to do this thing called the Lex Agraria and give out land to like the Roman soldiers and to like some of like the poorer people, and that he was part of the I can't remember that group, but there was a movement that Julius Caesar was a part of, who basically wanted to help regular people to some degree, and he and the other guys who were all members of the Populari movement, populists, right? Mm-hmm. He and all three of the main people of it all got taken out by the oligarchs of ancient Rome, who, if you watch the Black Nobility series that I do, was to some degree by that point were the Tyrians, the people came over from Tyre, who had also come over from Acadia, Babylon, and probably Sumeria. And so Malachians, same jerks, just show up all throughout history. But yeah, so I think people probably get a sense of the divine masculine is just that you're a provider, you're a protector, you move the culture forward, you're a philosopher-warrior. You're all four of the main male archetypes. Mm-hmm. The philosopher, the warrior, the king, the magician. Yeah. Right? Which we're both actually practicing magicians. That's probably the rarest archetype, is the magician. Did we mention the priest? The priest is the other one, right? So it's priest, warrior, king, magician, right?
I think that's it.
Yeah. And so the magician is probably the least common one in modernity. Priests are increasingly less common as well.
A lot less common. Well, they're becoming less common, especially in a lot of parts of the West.
It's the King Arthur version of the king. Yeah. Who he goes out there with his troops, and he's at the front of the battle.
Yeah, he's not just like sitting behind a desk.
Henry V and St. Crispin's Day, giving the speech, and then going out there and kicking ass. Leonidas,
King Leonidas, man,
King Leonidas fighting right there. That's definitely, I think he's a divine masculine archetype. You can say that because he went there and he just laid his life down to protect even those Athenian chumps that he didn't like so much,
those Athenians or whatever,
The Spartans are kind of like the ultimate alphas, I think. In history are right up there. Just ridiculous. Never stop working out and preparing to fight. So
they're into like eugenics and stuff. Oh, he's got a small wee wee. We need to throw him over the cliff. Jesus, man, that's like ridiculous, man. All Spartans must have big penises.
Wow, I've never heard about that, but that's hilarious. Must have some Spartan blood in me. So anyways, it must have been from that once a month thing, and somehow got lucky. But so I mean, I think most people understand the divine masculine, and then the divine feminine is just nurturing and loving to children and creating the energy of the homestead and creating that energy of support and fertility and fecundity and inspiration, and the muse that is there and inspires the husband to do more, and then the husband inspires the woman to work harder with the making of the homestead and so forth. And in modernity, we have no choice but to, all of us have to develop some of these skills that were traditionally very divided along gender lines. And so, like, you know, I know how to cook and clean and all that stuff, and I do it all the time. I'm a single dad. And so, and even usually when I have a partner, I'm almost always a better cook. So I do a lot of the cooking, and that's just natural. And I mean, there's a lot of male chefs, Anthony Bourdain and whatever, and it doesn't mean you're not masculine if you you know, cook or clean. It doesn't mean you're not feminine if you go to work every day 40 hours a week, you know.
And I think that's another thing that we should maybe like touch on a little bit,
Yeah.
is that there are spectrums in masculine and feminine. You know, as being human beings, we do have both and within us.
Absolutely.
We just reflect more of one than the other. You know,
Right.
There's a polarity, and I know some people in the spiritual community don't like that. They're like, polarity, everything's one. Everything, yeah, it's true, everything is one, but we're on this frequency. You know, ever since everything is vibration and frequency, we are reflecting that more of the masculine energy. We do have empathy, which is more of a feminine quality, and that's very important to have empathy and compassion. And you know, I've been a massage therapist for many years, so that's looked at as being a woman's job. I've had guys tell me that before, you know, things like that. I've been doing martial arts most of my life, and most of the people in the dojos were always men, you know, or boys. It was like more, at least in the 90s when I started doing it, it was always like mostly guys. And it really become popular for women until like much later and stuff, you know.
And so for me, it's more of a frequency you emit.
Yeah.
But I think it does inform your behavior as well. And so the feminine to me is like, it's naturally mysterious, and I don't think I can speak to it too much. I'm a man. And I wouldn't I'm not going to try and tell women what it is to be feminine. Oh, and that brings me back to, I want to circle back to something we were saying earlier. Our generation was raised by women. You know, the Fight Club, you know, we're a generation of men raised by women.
That's
their own way.
It's a great book. I like that book.
It's actually the author of that book says the movie is better than the book, because he collapsed the character called the mechanic and Tyler Durden into one character, which he was like, man, I should have done that in the book. I should have definitely done that in the book. Tyler Durden is definitely like the dark masculine alpha, 100%. And Edward Norton's character is definitely the nice guy. Is definitely the nice guy beta, who he's doing that pendulum swing from the nice guy beta over to this dark masculine F-boy player, you know, super aggressive alpha guy, who's the dark masculine. And he shows perfectly that thing. And how society always wants to get us to swing between that pendulum, not letting us see that there's a third point on that triangle, which is the healthy, integrated, divine masculine. And so, yeah, we're a generation of men, and especially millennials and Zoomers, raised by women. What I mean by that, well, most teachers, although this has changed somewhat over the years, are females. And then your dad's at work and you come home. For me, I would come home to my grandmother. My grandmother was home and she took care of me. And I had 3 older sisters. So I was just surrounded by feminine energy all the time, and I absorbed that. And my oldest sister was, I don't know if she'll listen to this, but she is super, super hyper second wave feminist. She still kind of is. And she really browbeat me with how men were bad and da-da-da-da-da-da. And then plus I was raised Catholic. So I was getting all these messages that were just very like feminizing. And at the same time, also, there's a chemical aspect that I want to address to all of this. And that is that when we were young, there was not that many pokies that kids would get. And I'm not going to use the word, but pokes.
Gotcha.
You know, like diphtheria and what's the other big one? Tetanus and all that stuff. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. There was like 7 we took, if that. And so why am I bringing that up? Well, if you look in the ingredients of these things, there's fetal tissue. And if you give a developing, especially an infant, fetal tissue of the opposite gender, some of that transgenically goes into your body, and it makes you, if you know, there's a 50-50 chance, obviously, that you're going to get the opposite gender in that. Now, it wasn't very much in our era of those pokies, but Reagan made it so those companies had no liability. The Childhood Pokey Act, the correct word for that. Or something like that. And it gave liability to those manufacturers. And it took them a little while to just be like, really? You're really going to let us just run hog wild and do whatever you want? Are you sure that you're not going to pull that back? And so starting sometime in the late 80s, because that happened in like 86 or something like that, they started pushing them out more and more and more and more and more. And they started really manipulating the formulas, and they started adding more adjuvants, which are things that make it last longer. Aluminum in particular being particularly egregious. It's a neurotoxin, mercury also being bad. They also added more of this fetal tissue. Well, bovine tissue, but also human fetal tissue. And it was, and I don't see any medical purpose for that whatsoever.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, what would be the I mean, I'm not a
what do they
scientist,
explain?
Like, what would be the purpose of putting fetal tissue or bovine tissue?
I don't know what I don't know what their explanation is, and I'm sure they have some convoluted mental gymnastics Olympics BS for why they put it in there. Their explanation for why they put aluminum in there is it causes an extreme immune response. And then they're like, why do people have autoimmune diseases? And why, if it travels to the brain, which aluminum does, why would we have a sudden rash of things like obsessive compulsive disorder, extreme anxiety, autism, right? So the algo might be going crunching numbers, treading on thin ice. You said some trigger words, but I haven't said the big word. They don't like the B word. And so the point of that is that with millennials, you get a much greater intensification of the social engineering war, along with you get this fetal tissue, the opposite gender, and you get things like atrazine, the infamous Alex Jones, they're making frogs gay. I actually think that Alex Jones saying that discredited very important work by a scientist who was actually starting to get a lot of traction. Interestingly enough, I say this just because by having Alex Jones say it, most people on the left won't even look into it. That scientist happens to be a black man who was immediately 86 by the corporation he was working for doing this research. I bring that up because if he had been the face of that amphibians are showing spontaneous sex change and we need to get atrazine out of the water supply and food supply where it's getting into for various reasons, if he had been the face of that, probably lefties would have looked into what the claim was, but instead it was Alex Jones. And so that's just one example, and there's millions of these. And then there's testosterone suppressants, seed oils, canola oil, safflower, sunflower oil. Coffee, apparently, to my horror, and that's something I haven't kicked yet, is a testosterone suppressant. And there's just so many, it's ridiculous. And testosterone seems to be the main thing. And also in any municipal water supply that's recycled, birth control hormones get into the water supply. And I noticed that because I have brothers who are like 8 years younger than me, I noticed that the girls that my brothers went to school with, I was like, wow, when I was in 8th grade, I was like 22 at the time, and my brother was like 13 or whatever, or I guess 21 at the time. And I went to pick them up from school, and I saw these 13-year-old girls, and I was like, I don't remember this many girls having D-cup boobs. What the hell's going on? So females are developing earlier. They're having periods much earlier. And males sometimes, male development is really, really, really delayed because of this lack of testosterone.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so there's a chemical warfare component to all this in addition to the social engineering. And so then you get to, I want to talk about the dark triad. And do you mind if we pause it for just a second?
Not at all.
Okay, so we're going to pause it. It'll be back instantly for you, viewer or listener.